The universe operates on principles we understand: physics, chemistry, the fundamental laws of cause and effect. Starfleet has catalogued thousands of species, mapped nebulae light years across, and negotiated peace with civilizations that view reality itself differently than humans do. But what happens when something defies every sensor, every theory, every rational explanation? What happens when a young man with impossible abilities appears from nowhere, carrying with him a philosophy that challenges the very foundation of the Prime Directive? Captain Jean-Luc Picard stood in Transporter Room 3 of the USS Enterprise-D, hands clasped behind his back, watching Dr. Beverly Crusher run her medical tricorder over an unconscious human male lying on the transporter pad. The young man wore a strange red and blue suit that clung to his body like a second skin, a spider emblem emblazoned across his chest. His face was covered by a mask, but Crusher had already confirmed he was human, or at least, mostly human. "Captain, his vital signs are stable, but his physiology is unusual," Crusher said, her brow furrowed as she studied the tricorder readings. "Enhanced muscle density, altered bone structure, and there's something in his neurological patterns I've never seen before. It's almost like a low-level psionic field constantly scanning his immediate surroundings. Could he be from a parallel universe?" Commander William Riker asked, standing at Picard's side. "We've encountered dimensional rifts before." "Possibly," Lieutenant Commander Data replied from the transporter console. "The subspace rupture we detected 17 minutes ago exhibited quantum signatures consistent with multiversal breach theory. However, the rupture collapsed before we could gather sufficient data." Picard approached the unconscious figure carefully. Whoever this young man was, he had arrived through circumstances beyond his control. The Enterprise had been conducting a routine diplomatic mission to the Keswick 4 colony when sensors detected the rupture, a tear in the fabric of space itself, lasting less than 3 seconds. By the time they had beamed aboard whatever had come through, the anomaly had sealed. "Lieutenant Worf, security status?" Picard asked. The Klingon security chief stood near the doorway, phaser ready but not raised. "All security protocols are in place, Captain. However, I recommend moving him to sickbay under guard until we determine if he poses a threat." "Agreed. Dr. Crusher, have him transported directly to—" The young man's hand suddenly shot up, gripping Crusher's wrist with inhuman speed. His body tensed, and even through the mask, Picard could sense panic. The doctor gasped but didn't pull away. "Easy," Crusher said softly, her voice calm despite the iron grip on her wrist. "You're safe. You're aboard the Federation starship Enterprise. I'm a doctor." The masked figure's head turned rapidly, taking in the transporter room, the uniformed officers, the technology surrounding him. His breathing quickened. Then, slowly, he released Crusher's wrist and sat up, his movements unnaturally fluid. Where am I?" The voice was young, male, tinged with confusion and fear. "This isn't New York. This isn't even," he looked down at his hands, flexing his fingers. "Oh no. No, no, no. Please tell me I didn't just universe hop again." "Again?" Riker repeated, exchanging a glance with Picard. The masked man stood, and Worf's hand moved to his phaser. But the stranger raised his hands in a gesture of peace. "Whoa, big guy. Not looking for trouble. Just trying to figure out where, or when, I am." He paused, tilting his head as if listening to something no one else could hear. Then he looked directly at Picard. "You're in charge. And you're genuinely trying to help. I can sense that. I am Captain Jean-Luc Picard of the United Federation of Planets. You are aboard the USS Enterprise. We detected a subspace anomaly and transported you aboard when we realized someone had come through." Picard kept his voice measured, diplomatic. "May I ask who you are?" The young man hesitated, then reached up and pulled off his mask. A human face emerged, late 20s perhaps, brown hair disheveled, brown eyes wide with a mix of fear and wonder. "Peter Parker." Most people back home call me Spider-Man. He looked around again, his gaze settling on the transporter pad. And I think I'm very, very far from home. Data's head tilted in that characteristic way of his. Spider-Man. Your designation suggests arachnid association. Are you a genetically modified human? Peter let out a short, humorless laugh. Radioactive spider bite when I was 15. Got powers. Became a superhero. Same old story. He looked at his hands again, then at the walls of the Enterprise. But this is different. I've been to other dimensions before, fought alongside other spider people, but this feels wrong. Like the rules are different here. Crusher stepped forward, tricorder still in hand. Mr. Parker, I'd like to run some tests. Whatever happened to you, it's left some unusual readings in your biology. Nothing dangerous, she added quickly, seeing his defensive posture, but I'd like to understand what we're dealing with. Peter's shoulders sagged. Yeah. Okay. I'm guessing you're not S.H.I.E.L.D., you're not the Avengers, and you're definitely not my usual rogues gallery. He looked at Picard. So what now, Captain? Do I get the, explain yourself or we throw you in the brig speech? Picard allowed himself a slight smile. The Federation does not operate that way, Mr. Parker. You are here through no fault of your own. We will help you understand your situation and, if possible, return you to your proper universe. He gestured toward the door. But first, I believe Dr. Crusher's medical examination is in order. And then, perhaps, you can tell us more about these powers of yours. As they walked toward sickbay, Peter kept glancing at the corridors, the technology, the crew members they passed. Everything was clean, efficient, almost utopian. It reminded him of some of the advanced civilizations he'd seen in comics, but this was real. The hum of the ship, the soft glow of the lights, the calm professionalism of everyone around him, it all felt like something out of a dream. Or a nightmare, depending on whether he could ever get home. His spider sense suddenly tingled, not danger, but awareness. Someone was watching him. Peter turned to see a gold-skinned officer observing him with unblinking curiosity. Not human. Definitely not human. Fascinating, Data said, walking alongside him. Your reflexes are approximately 40 times faster than baseline human standards. And the way you perceived my observation suggests a form of extrasensory perception. Spider sense, Peter said automatically. Warns me about danger. Or sometimes just, things I should pay attention to. A precognitive early warning system, Data mused. Similar to Betazoid empathy, but focused on physical threats rather than emotional states. Peter blinked. Betazoid? An empathic species within the Federation, Picard explained. You have much to learn about this universe, Mr. Parker. And we, it seems, have much to learn about you. As they entered sickbay, Peter couldn't shake the feeling that his friendly neighborhood had just expanded to include the entire galaxy. And if there was one thing he'd learned from being Spider-Man, it was that with great power came great responsibility, even if that power was just trying to survive in a universe that operated by completely different rules. If you want to see more characters enter the Star Trek universe, hit that subscribe button and drop the name of a character you'd want to see in the comments below. Live long and prosper. Behind them, Worf remained vigilant, his hand never straying far from his phaser. In his experience, beings with unusual abilities were often the most dangerous, not because of malice, but because they rarely understood the consequences of their power. This Spider-Man seemed genuine, but Worf had learned long ago that appearances could deceive. And somewhere in the subspace frequencies surrounding the Enterprise, a faint signal pulsed outward, carrying data about the human with impossible biology. Data that would reach ears, and minds, far more dangerous than anyone aboard the ship could anticipate. Sickbay's sterile white walls and soft blue lighting reminded Peter of every hospital he'd ever been in, except the technology looked like it belonged in a science fiction movie. Dr. Crusher directed him to sit on a bio bed while she positioned several scanning devices around him. The instruments hummed with a frequency that made his spider sense tingle uncomfortably. "Try to relax," Crusher said, noticing his tension. "These are just standard medical scanners. They won't hurt you." "It's not pain I'm worried about," Peter muttered. "My spider sense doesn't like being scanned. Had some bad experiences with people trying to replicate my powers." Data stood nearby, his golden eyes observing with mechanical precision. "Your apprehension is understandable. However, Dr. Crusher's equipment operates on entirely different principles than what you may be familiar with. We use quantum resonance imaging and biomolecular analysis rather than traditional radiation-based scanning." The scans began, and Peter watched the displays above him light up with information he couldn't begin to interpret. Crusher's expression shifted from curious to concerned to outright baffled within seconds. "Captain," she said, gesturing Picard over to her console. "Look at this. His DNA has been fundamentally altered at the molecular level. There are sequences I've never seen in any humanoid species. They're almost arachnid in nature." "The radioactive spider," Picard said quietly. "You mentioned it rewrote your genetic code?" "Something like that," Peter replied. "One bite, and suddenly I could stick to walls, lift cars, and sense danger before it happened. My world's scientists never fully understood it. Something about radiation interacting with spider venom in a way that should have killed me but instead gave me powers." "Impossible," Crusher said, then immediately corrected herself. "No, clearly not impossible. But by every biological principle I understand, this should have resulted in massive cellular breakdown and death. Instead, your body incorporated the arachnid characteristic seamlessly." She looked at him with something approaching awe. "You're a medical miracle, Mr. Parker." "Yeah, well, miracle or not, it's been more of a curse than a blessing some days." Peter sat up as the scans completed. "So what's the verdict, Doc? Am I compatible with your universe, or am I going to phase out of existence in 3 days?" "You appear stable," Crusher assured him. "Your biology is adapting to our dimensional constants. However, there is one concern." She pulled up a molecular diagram. "Your enhanced metabolism requires significantly more caloric intake than a normal human. In your universe, I assume you compensated with increased food consumption?" Peter nodded. "Aunt May used to joke that feeding me was like feeding a small army." "Our replicators can provide adequate nutrition," Data interjected. "However, it will require adjustment of standard ration protocols." Picard stepped forward. "Mr. Parker, before we discuss logistics, I must understand the full scope of your abilities. You've mentioned enhanced strength and this spider sense. What else should we know?" Peter hesitated. He'd learned the hard way that revealing everything about his powers could make him a target. But these people had been nothing but helpful, and something about Captain Picard's steady gaze suggested he could be trusted. "Okay. Full disclosure." Peter stood and walked to the wall. Without warning, he placed his hand against it and lifted his feet off the ground, hanging sideways as if gravity had simply stopped applying to him. Crusher gasped. Data's eyes widened fractionally, the android equivalent of shock. "Wall crawling," Peter explained, walking up the wall and across the ceiling. "Some kind of molecular adhesion. I can stick to any surface and hold several times my body weight." He dropped back down, landing in a crouch that absorbed the impact perfectly. "Superhuman strength, I can lift about 10 tons on a good day. Agility and reflexes way beyond human normal. Accelerated healing, though not Wolverine level. And the spider sense, it's like a sixth sense that warns me about danger. Sometimes seconds before it happens, sometimes just in time to react." Worf, who had been standing guard by the door, spoke for the first time since they entered sickbay. "A formidable warrior. Your abilities would serve well in combat." "I'm not a warrior," Peter said firmly. "I'm a protector. There's a difference." Indeed there is, Picard agreed. The Federation understands that distinction well. He gestured for Peter to sit again. However, I must ask about the devices on your wrists. They appear to be technological rather than biological. Peter looked down at his web shooters. These? Yeah, these are mine, well, my design. Mechanical web shooters. I created a synthetic webbing formula back in high school. Tensile strength of 120 pounds per square millimeter, dissolves naturally after 2 hours, incredibly versatile. He demonstrated by pointing at a medical tray and firing a thin strand of webbing that yanked it into his hand. I use them for swinging between buildings, tying up bad guys, creating shields, whatever the situation needs. Data immediately crossed to Peter's side. May I examine the mechanism? The engineering principles involved in creating a room-temperature polymer with such properties would be. Data, Picard interrupted gently. Perhaps after Mr. Parker has had time to acclimate. But Peter was already removing one web shooter, handing it to Data. Actually, I'd love to see what you make of it. My universe's tech is probably primitive compared to yours, but the basic chemistry might be interesting. Data accepted the device with something resembling excitement, as much as an android could display. The miniaturization alone is remarkable. To contain sufficient material for multiple deployments in such a compact housing suggests compression technology or perhaps dimensional storage principles. Just really good chemical engineering, Peter said with a slight smile. Though I'm going to have a problem. I'm almost out of web fluid, and I have no idea if your replicators can recreate the formula. We can certainly try, Crusher said. If you can provide the chemical composition. I can do better than that. I can write it out. Peter's expression grew more animated. I'm actually a scientist back home. Biochemistry and physics. Worked with some of the smartest people on my Earth. His smile faded. Or at least I did before I got pulled here. Picard recognized the look, displacement, loss, the sudden awareness of being separated from everything familiar. He'd seen it in temporal refugees, in survivors of destroyed colonies, in anyone torn from their home without warning. Mr. Parker, Peter, if I may, I know this situation must be overwhelming. You've been pulled from your universe without warning, surrounded by technology and concepts that must seem alien. But I want you to understand something. Picard's voice carried the weight of genuine compassion. The Federation was built on the principle that no sentient being should face the universe alone. Whatever has happened to you, we will help you navigate it. Whether that means finding a way to return you home or helping you adapt to this reality, you are not alone. Peter felt something tighten in his chest. How many times had he been the one offering comfort, assuring people that Spider-Man would save them, that everything would be okay? Now he was on the other side of that equation, and it was harder than he'd ever imagined. Thank you, Captain, he said quietly. That means more than you know. Worf's communicator chirped. He tapped it. Worf here. Security Chief, this is Lieutenant Chen on the bridge. We're detecting another subspace fluctuation. Same quantum signature as the previous anomaly. It's building rapidly. Picard's expression hardened. Can you determine the source? Negative, Captain. But it's not localized to our position, it's sector-wide. Whatever brought Mr. Parker through may be affecting a much larger area of space. Peter's spider sense suddenly exploded with warning. He jumped to his feet, every instinct screaming danger. Something's wrong. Something's very, very wrong. What do you sense? Picard asked, immediately trusting the warning. I don't know, but it's big. And it's coming. Peter looked at the ceiling as if he could see through the hull of the ship. Whatever pulled me here, it's not done. Something else is coming through. Picard tapped his communicator. Bridge, this is the captain. Red alert. Raise shields and scan for any anomalous activity. Riker, I'm on my way. He turned to Peter. It seems your arrival was merely the opening act. I suggest you accompany me to the bridge. Your unique perceptions may prove valuable. As alarms began to wail throughout the ship and the lighting shifted to emergency red, Peter pulled his mask back on. Spider-Man was back in action, even if the neighborhood had just expanded to include starships and alien species. They ran through corridors filled with crew members moving to battle stations with practiced efficiency. Peter's mind raced. What could trigger his spider sense on a ship-wide scale? What kind of danger operated on such a massive level? When the turbolift doors opened onto the bridge, Peter got his first glimpse of the Enterprise's command center. The view screen dominated the forward wall, currently displaying a field of stars that looked both familiar and utterly alien. Officers worked at various stations, calling out reports in calm, professional tones despite the red alert. And on the view screen, space itself was tearing open. A massive rift, easily large enough to swallow the Enterprise whole, pulsed with sickly green energy. The stars around it bent and distorted, as if reality itself was being twisted into new shapes. "Report," Picard ordered, taking his command chair. "The anomaly is expanding," reported the officer at Ops. "Energy readings are off the scale. It's not just a dimensional rift, it's a convergence point. Multiple quantum signatures are present." Peter stared at the rift, his spider sense screaming. "Captain, I've seen something like this before. Back home, there was an event called the convergence. Multiple dimensions bleeding into each other. If this is the same thing." The rift pulsed, and something emerged. It wasn't a ship. It wasn't a creature. It was a figure, humanoid but clearly not human, surrounded by crackling energy that made the view screen flicker. And as it turned toward the Enterprise, Peter felt his spider sense reach a fever pitch. "Captain," Data reported, his voice carrying an edge of concern that seemed impossible for an android. "That entity is scanning us. Specifically, it appears to be scanning for biological distinctiveness." Worf's hands moved over his tactical console. "Shields are holding, but that energy signature, Captain, I'm reading technology consistent with." The entity's voice boomed across the bridge, carried by some form of transmission that bypassed their communications entirely. Cold. Mechanical. Utterly devoid of emotion. "We are the Borg. You will be assimilated. Resistance is futile." And Peter Parker realized that his very bad day had just gotten infinitely worse. Peter had faced many things in his career as Spider-Man: alien invasions, multiversal threats, gods, monsters, and everything in between. But the absolute certainty in that voice, the complete absence of doubt, mercy, or hesitation, sent a chill down his spine that had nothing to do with his spider sense. "Borg?" Peter asked, looking at the crew's reactions. Every face on the bridge had gone pale. Even Worf, who struck Peter as someone who didn't scare easily, had tensed like a predator recognizing a greater predator. "The Borg Collective," Picard said, his voice tight with controlled emotion. "A cybernetic hive mind that assimilates entire civilizations, stripping away individuality and adding their biological and technological distinctiveness to their own. They are one of the most dangerous threats the Federation has ever encountered. Mr. Worf, evasive maneuvers. Get us clear of that rift." Riker had moved to stand beside Picard's chair, his easy demeanor replaced by combat readiness. The Enterprise banked hard, and Peter grabbed a nearby console to steady himself. Through the view screen, he watched as the Borg entity, a drone, Data called it, was joined by another, then another. They weren't emerging from the rift anymore. They were materializing directly into space, as if teleporting. "They're adapting to our defensive posture," Data reported. "The Borg have likely catalogued our tactical responses from previous encounters. They are compensating." A beam of green energy lanced out from one of the drones, striking the Enterprise's shields. The ship shuddered, and sparks flew from an aft console. "Shields holding at 87%, Worf announced. Returning fire." Golden phaser beams erupted from the Enterprise's arrays, striking the lead drone. For a moment, the creature was engulfed in energy. Then the light faded, and the drone continued its approach, completely unharmed. "They've adapted," Worf growled. "Phasers are ineffective." "Try rotating shield frequencies," Picard ordered. "Mr. Data, how many drones are we facing?" 17 and increasing, Captain. The rift is destabilizing further. I am detecting multiple quantum signatures emerging, not all of them Borg. Peter's spider sense was going haywire, pinging in multiple directions at once. "Captain, whatever came through that rift, it's not just these Borg things. There's something else. Multiple somethings." As if in response to his words, the rift convulsed violently. A massive shape began to emerge, angular, dark, covered in circuitry and glowing green lights. It was a ship, but calling it that felt inadequate. It was a geometric nightmare, a cube of technology that screamed wrongness to every one of Peter's enhanced senses. "Borg cube," Picard said quietly, and Peter heard something in his voice that he'd never expected to hear from the composed captain: fear. Not panic, but the deep, controlled fear of someone who had faced this enemy before and barely survived. One ship with the power to assimilate entire worlds. "Captain, we need to withdraw," Riker said urgently. "We can't fight a cube with a single Galaxy-class starship." "Agreed." "Helm, set course." "Captain." The officer at Ops spun around, her face ashen. "The cube is locking onto something. Not us, it's scanning for a specific biological signature." She looked directly at Peter. "It's scanning for him." Every eye on the bridge turned to Spider-Man. "Me?" Peter's mind raced. "Why would they want me? I just got here." Data's fingers flew across his console. "The Borg operate by assimilating unique biological and technological traits. Your enhanced abilities, superhuman strength, wall adhesion, and most significantly, your precognitive spider sense, would represent biological distinctiveness they have not encountered before. They detected you when you came through the rift," Picard said, standing from his chair. "The same quantum signature that brought you here drew their attention. To them, you represent something new to add to their collective." The Borg cube's voice resonated through the bridge again, bypassing their shields and communications as if they were meaningless. "Spider-Man. Your biological and technological distinctiveness will be added to our own. You cannot hide. You cannot run. Assimilation is inevitable." "Okay, that's officially creepy," Peter muttered. "How do they even know my name?" "The Borg assimilate memories along with bodies," Crusher's voice came over the comm from sickbay. "If they scanned you during your emergence, they would have accessed surface thoughts, possibly memories." Peter felt his blood run cold. If they had his memories, they knew about his spider sense, his web shooters, his fighting style. They knew his strengths and weaknesses. They knew about Aunt May, about MJ, about... His spider sense shrieked. "Down!" Peter didn't think. He launched himself across the bridge, tackling Picard to the deck just as a beam of green energy tore through the viewscreen's protective shielding and struck exactly where the captain had been standing. The beam continued through the bridge, burning a hole in the bulkhead before dissipating. "Shields are failing," Worf roared. "They've adapted to our frequency rotation. The Borg are transporting to our position," Data announced with android comm that somehow made the statement more terrifying. Multiple signatures materializing throughout the ship. Red alert klaxons wailed as the sound of mechanical footsteps echoed through the corridor beyond the bridge. Peter helped Picard to his feet, his spider sense painting a three-dimensional map of danger in his mind. 4 drones in the corridor. 2 more transporting into engineering. 1 materializing near sickbay, near Dr. Crusher. "Captain, they're everywhere," Peter said. "I can sense them. They're not just boarding, they're targeting specific locations. Engineering, your medical bay, and they're coming for the bridge." Picard's jaw set. All hands, this is the captain. Repel boarders. Authorization Picard Delta 5. Computer, initiate emergency force fields around vital systems. The bridge doors hissed open, and Peter's spider sense exploded. He moved on pure instinct, flipping over the tactical console as a Borg drone stepped onto the bridge. It was humanoid in the loosest sense, a nightmare fusion of pale flesh and black mechanical components, tubes pumping green fluid through its body, a laser targeting device replacing one eye. Worf fired his phaser at maximum setting. The beam struck the drone in the chest, and this time it staggered, but only for a second. Then the mechanical parts of its body glowed, and it continued forward. Adapting already, Worf snarled, drawing a batleth, a curved Klingon blade, from the weapons locker. Then we fight with honor. The Klingon charged, and Peter watched in horrified fascination as Worf swung the blade with enough force to cleave the drone's arm clean off. But the creature didn't scream, didn't bleed, just reached out with its remaining arm, mechanical tendrils extending toward Worf's neck. Peter webbed the tendrils, yanking hard. The drone stumbled, and Worf's blade found its neck. The creature collapsed, finally still. They can adapt to energy weapons, but not physical trauma, Data observed, already moving toward the weapons locker. Fascinating. Their technology compensates for anticipated threats but struggles with unpredictable kinetic attacks. Great, Peter said, firing webbing at the second drone entering the bridge. So they're like most of my villains, I just have to hit them really hard. He launched himself at the webbed drone, his enhanced strength driving his fist through its chest cavity. Circuit sparked and fluid sprayed, and the drone collapsed. But even as it fell, Peter's spider sense warned him of 3 more materializing behind him. This isn't sustainable, Riker said, grabbing a phaser rifle. For every one we stop, 2 more beam aboard. Picard's mind worked frantically. The Borg wanted Peter specifically. They were systematically overwhelming the Enterprise to capture him. Which meant, they're not trying to assimilate the ship, Picard realized aloud. They're hurting us. Using the cube as a distraction while drones pursue Mr. Parker. He turned to Peter. Your spider sense, how precise is it? Pretty precise, Peter said, webbing another drone to the ceiling. I can sense threats before they happen, track multiple targets, get a general idea of where danger is coming from. Could you sense a way off this ship? A safe route to the shuttle bay? Peter closed his eyes, letting his spider sense expand. The Enterprise was a maze of corridors to him, but the danger points lit up in his mind like a 3-dimensional map of disaster. He could see the Borg advancing, could sense their coordination. But there, a gap in their pattern, a route they hadn't covered yet. Yeah. I can get us to a shuttle. But Captain, I'm not running while your crew fights my battle. This isn't your battle, Mr. Parker, Picard said firmly. The Borg have encountered the Federation before. They will continue to pose a threat whether you're here or not. But if we can deny them your unique abilities, we preserve an advantage. And more importantly, we preserve your life. Another drone burst through the auxiliary entrance. Data moved with mechanical precision, driving a support beam through its torso. The android's strength surprised Peter. Data might look human, but he fought like a machine optimized for combat efficiency. Captain, engineering reports the warp core is being targeted, came a voice over the comm. The Borg are attempting to drain our antimatter reserves. We have maybe 5 minutes before total power failure. Peter's spider sense suddenly screamed a warning unlike any he'd felt before. Not immediate danger, something worse. Something inevitable rushing toward them through space and time. Captain, that cube, it's not just sitting there. It's charging something. Some kind of weapon. Data's fingers flew over his console. Confirmed. The cube is channeling power to a tractor beam array. They intend to immobilize us completely. He looked up, his golden eyes meeting Picard's. Captain, if they lock us in place, the assimilation of the Enterprise will be complete within 22 minutes. Picard made his decision. Mr. Parker, take Data and get to Shuttle Bay 2. Data, you'll pilot a Type 6 shuttle and create a diversion. Draw the cube's attention away from the Enterprise. Captain, I cannot leave you, Data protested. That's an order, Commander. You are the only one with the reaction time to evade Borg tractor beams long enough to matter. And Mr. Parker needs someone who understands our technology. Picard looked at Peter. I'm trusting you with one of my finest officers. Keep him safe. Peter wanted to argue. Every instinct screamed at him to stay and fight, to protect these people who had shown him nothing but kindness. But he'd learned long ago that sometimes the best way to protect people was to become the target, to draw fire away from innocent lives. I'll get him out, Captain. Spider-Man's promise. Then go. And Mr. Parker? Picard's eyes held a weight of experience Peter was only beginning to understand. Welcome to the 24th century. I'm sorry it wasn't under better circumstances. Peter and Data ran for the turbolift as another explosion rocked the bridge. Behind them, Worf roared a Klingon battle cry, and the sound of combat intensified. As the turbolift doors closed, Peter caught one last glimpse of Captain Picard, standing tall amid the chaos, directing his crew with calm authority even as the Borg closed in. And Peter Parker made himself a promise, somehow, some way, he was going to save these people. Even if it meant facing down an army of cybernetic nightmares to do it. Because that's what Spider-Man did. The turbolift descended with smooth efficiency that felt wrong given the chaos erupting throughout the ship. Peter's spider sense painted a constantly shifting map of danger, Borg drones moving through adjacent corridors, energy weapons firing on distant decks, and the overwhelming presence of the cube outside, its intent like a weight pressing against his consciousness. The shuttle bay is 7 decks below our current position, Data said, his voice carrying no trace of fear or urgency. Just calm, analytical assessment. However, my sensors indicate Borg presence on decks 12, 14, and 15. Our route will require tactical improvisation. Improvisation I can do, Peter said. It's kind of my specialty. He glanced at the android. So you're not human. I mean, you look human, but... I am an android. A sentient artificial life form created by Dr. Nunyan Sung. Data tilted his head in that curious way of his. Does my nature disturb you? Are you kidding? I fought alongside an AI named Jarvis, teamed up with synthetics, and once had a very confusing conversation with Ultron before he tried to kill me. You're probably the most normal thing I've encountered since getting here. Peter's spider sense suddenly spiked. Except for the fact that we're about to have company. 3 decks down. They're waiting for us. Data's fingers moved to the turbolift controls. I am stopping at deck 10. We will proceed through the Jeffries tubes, maintenance shafts that provide access throughout the ship. The Borg typically ignore such routes during initial boarding actions, focusing on primary corridors and vital systems. The turbolift doors opened onto a corridor awash in red emergency lighting. The sound of phaser fire echoed from somewhere nearby, along with the mechanical footsteps of Borg drones. Data moved with purpose, prying open an access panel and gesturing for Peter to follow. The Jeffries tube was cramped, barely wide enough for a person to crawl through, with exposed conduits running along the walls. Peter's claustrophobia kicked in briefly, but his spider sense helped him navigate the tight space, warning him of sharp edges and structural weak points. This reminds me of air ducts back home, Peter muttered, crawling behind Data. Except usually I'm trying to sneak past security, not cyborg zombies. The Borg are not zombies, Data corrected. They retain consciousness and memory, but their individuality is subsumed into the collective's hive mind. It is, in many ways, a fate worse than death. Yeah, I'm getting that impression. Peter's mind drifted to the drones they'd fought on the bridge, the way they moved with perfect coordination, the absence of fear or hesitation. Data, why do they want me specifically? I mean, I'm just one guy with spider powers. Your universe has aliens, advanced technology, probably 1,000 species with abilities way more impressive than mine. Data paused at a junction, accessing a wall panel to check their route. Your abilities are unique in several ways. First, your spider sense represents a form of precognition the Borg have not successfully assimilated. Betazoid empathy provides emotional awareness, but not physical danger prediction. Second, your powers stem from a fusion of radiation and biological mutation, a process that defies our current understanding of genetic modification. The Borg seek to understand and replicate such phenomena. So I'm basically a shiny new toy they want to take apart. A crude but accurate assessment. Data resumed crawling. Additionally, the quantum signature that brought you here may suggest you possess transdimensional properties. The Borg's interest in cross-dimensional travel is well documented. You may represent a key to accessing parallel universes. Peter's spider sense flared. Data, stop. Something's ahead. Not a drone, something else. Data consulted his tricorder. You are correct. I am reading a spatial distortion 3 meters ahead. It appears to be a localized subspace anomaly similar to the rift that brought you here. They crawled forward cautiously, and Peter saw it, a shimmering patch of air that looked like heat distortion, but wrong, as if space itself was bruised. Through the distortion, he could see fragments of other places, a city street that might have been New York, a swirling void of colors that hurt to look at, and something that looked disturbingly like the inside of the Borg cube. The multiverse is bleeding through, Peter whispered. I've seen this before. When too much dimensional energy concentrates in one place, reality starts to break down. The walls between universes get thin. Then the rift that brought you here may have destabilized local spacetime, Data said. The Borg cube's emergence likely exacerbated the problem. We are experiencing cascading dimensional breaches. Which means more things could come through. Things potentially worse than the Borg. Peter's spider sense suddenly screamed, and he grabbed Data, yanking them both backward just as the distortion exploded outward. Something emerged, not a drone, but a creature of writhing darkness and too many limbs, its form constantly shifting as if it couldn't decide what shape to be. Fascinating, Data said, even as the creature lunged. A transdimensional entity without a stable physical form. Less fascinating, more running. Peter fired webbing at the creature, but his webs passed through it like it wasn't entirely there. The creature shrieked, a sound that bypassed Peter's ears and resonated directly in his skull, and lashed out with appendages that flickered between solid and incorporeal. Peter's spider sense guided his movements, dodging attacks that came from angles that shouldn't exist. Data drew his phaser, firing multiple shots that had minimal effect. The creature was adapting to this dimension but wasn't fully part of it yet. Data, if this thing becomes fully solid in our dimension, it would likely be far more dangerous than the Borg, Data finished. However, its instability suggests a vulnerability. If we can disrupt its quantum coherence before it fully manifests. Peter's mind raced. Quantum coherence. Dimensional stability. His spider sense was designed to protect him from danger, but what if he could use it differently? What if instead of just sensing dimensional instability, he could interact with it? It was crazy. It went against everything he understood about his powers. But he was in a different universe with different rules, and crazy had worked for him before. Peter closed his eyes, focusing on his spider sense. Instead of letting it warn him about the creature's attacks, he tried to feel the dimensional distortion itself, the weakness in reality that allowed the creature to exist here. And there, he could sense it. A frequency, a vibration where this dimension and the creature's home dimension overlapped. Data, when I tell you, fire your phaser at maximum setting directly at the creature's center mass. Don't aim for the body, aim for the space it's occupying. That will have no effect on. Trust me. I'm going to do something really stupid. Peter launched himself at the creature, not to attack it, but to touch the dimensional distortion surrounding it. His enhanced reflexes and spider sense guided his hand to the exact point where dimensions intersected. The moment his fingers made contact, pain exploded through his nervous system, like touching a live wire made of broken reality. But he held on, his entire body vibrating at a frequency that shouldn't be possible. Now, Data. The android fired without hesitation. The phaser beam struck the distortion, and with Peter's body acting as a dimensional anchor point, the energy didn't just pass through, it resonated. The creature shrieked again, its form destabilizing, and then it collapsed inward, sucked back through the breach. The distortion sealed with a sound like reality sighing in relief. Peter collapsed, his hand smoking slightly, his spider sense momentarily overloaded. Data caught him before he hit the deck. "Mr. Parker, that was extraordinarily dangerous. You could have been pulled through into another dimension." "Yeah, well, seemed like the thing to do at the time." Peter's vision swam, but his spider sense was already recovering, recalibrating to this universe's dimensional constants. "Is it gone?" "The entity has been expelled, and the breach has stabilized. However, I am detecting 3 more spatial distortions forming throughout the ship. The dimensional barriers are degrading rapidly." Peter forced himself to his feet. "Then we need to move. Get to that shuttle, draw the Borg away, and somehow figure out how to seal these breaches before something worse comes through." "Something worse than the Borg?" Data's tone suggested he found that concept improbable. "Trust me, Data. The multiverse is full of things that make the Borg look friendly." Peter's spider sense suddenly painted a new picture of danger. "Speaking of which, we've got drones closing in from both directions. They know where we are. Then we must accelerate our timeline." Data pulled open another access panel, revealing a vertical shaft. "This maintenance corridor will take us directly to Deck 15. From there, Shuttle Bay 2 is accessible through a single corridor." "How far is the drop?" "Approximately 40 meters. Peter looked down the shaft, his spider sense mapping the distance, the handholds, the danger points. "I can make that." "Can you?" "I am capable of controlled descents exceeding 100 meters. Data gripped the ladder rungs and began descending with mechanical precision. Peter stuck to the wall, using his adhesive abilities to climb down headfirst, moving faster than should be possible. As they descended, he could hear the Borg above them, their mechanical voices droning in perfect unison. "Spider-Man will be assimilated. Resistance is futile." "You know," Peter said as they dropped, "I really hate it when villains give me the 'resistance is futile' speech. It's like they've never heard of the underdog story arc." They reached the bottom of the shaft, and Data accessed another panel. "The shuttle bay is 30 meters ahead through this corridor. However, I am detecting 7 Borg drones between our position and our destination." 7. Peter's spider sense confirmed it. "Okay, I've faced worse odds. Usually. Sometimes. Look, I'm very confident right now." Data looked at him with what might have been android amusement. "Your humor in stressful situations is similar to Captain Kirk's psychological profile. He also employed levity to manage fear and maintain crew morale. I'll take that as a compliment." Peter peered around the corner. The corridor ahead was long and straight, no cover, no alternate routes. 7 Borg drones stood in perfect formation, blocking the path to the shuttle bay doors. Their laser targeting systems swept the corridor in synchronized patterns. "Data, I don't suppose you have any brilliant android ideas?" "Actually, I do. The Borg adapt to repeated attack patterns. However, you possess abilities they have not yet fully catalogued. If you can create sufficient chaos, I can access the shuttle bay controls and override the door locks. Chaos is literally my middle name." "Well, not literally, that would be weird. But you get the point." Peter cracked his knuckles. "How long do you need?" 17 seconds. 17 seconds of chaos against 7 killer cyborgs. "No problem. I've had worse Monday mornings. Peter took a deep breath, his spider sense already plotting attack vectors, dodge patterns, and optimal web-slinging trajectories. Then he stepped into the corridor, raised his wrist, and fired webbing at the ceiling, yanking himself into a swing that carried him directly toward the Borg formation. Hey, tin cans! Let's dance! The Borg turned in perfect unison, their collective consciousness assessing this new threat. And Peter Parker, the friendly neighborhood Spider-Man, brought New York-style superhero chaos to the 24th century. Peter hit the Borg formation like a red and blue meteor, feet first into the lead drone's chest. The impact sent the creature stumbling backward into two others, and Peter used the momentum to flip over their heads, firing webbing at their legs as he passed. 3 drones went down in a tangle of synthesized polymer and mechanical limbs. The remaining 4 adapted immediately, spreading out to prevent him from using the same tactic again. Their assimilation tubules extended, mechanical tendrils tipped with nanoprobes designed to inject Borg technology directly into victims. Peter's spider sense screamed warnings as the tubules lashed out from multiple angles. He twisted mid-air, his enhanced flexibility allowing him to contort his body in ways that looked physically impossible. A tubule passed millimeters from his face. Another grazed his shoulder, and he felt a brief burning sensation before his accelerated healing kicked in, his immune system fighting off the nanoprobes before they could establish a connection. Note to self, Peter grunted, webbing a drone's face and yanking it off balance. Super healing is really handy against cyborg zombie injections. Data was at the control panel, his fingers moving faster than human eyes could track. 11 seconds remaining. A Borg drone grabbed Peter's ankle mid-swing. His spider sense had warned him, but he'd allowed it, counted on it, even. The drone pulled him close, tubules extending toward his neck. Peter planted his free foot against the drone's chest and pushed, using his superhuman strength to tear his ankle free from the mechanical grip. The drone's hand came with him, still attached to his leg by sheer grip strength until Peter kicked it loose. Okay, that's gross. That's really gross. 2 drones moved to flank him, their coordination perfect. The Borg Collective was learning his movement patterns, adapting to his spider sense predictions. Peter could feel it, each attack came closer, each dodge required more precision. They were evolving their tactics in real time. He fired webbing at the ceiling, yanking himself up just as both drones lunged. They collided with each other, but instead of showing confusion or frustration, they simply recalibrated and continued their pursuit. One began climbing the wall, awkwardly, without Peter's natural grace, but with relentless determination. Data, I'm running out of ceiling. 4 seconds. The 3 drones he'd webbed earlier were breaking free, their mechanical strength tearing through his webbing. Peter had known it wouldn't hold them long, but he'd hoped for more time. His spider sense painted a picture of converging threats from all directions. Then something changed. The drones all paused simultaneously, their heads tilting in unison as if listening to a voice Peter couldn't hear. When they looked at him again, their laser targeting systems had shifted from red to green. Data, why did they change color? The Collective has upgraded its priority assessment. They are no longer attempting to capture you, they are attempting to kill you. That's worse. That's definitely worse. Peter webbed one drone's head and swung it like a wrecking ball into another. Why would they do that? Likely because your resistance has proven more effective than anticipated. The Collective has calculated that eliminating you is more efficient than assimilation. A drone raised its arm, and Peter's spider sense screamed a new warning. A weapon, an energy blade extending from the creature's forearm, sliced through the air where Peter's head had been a microsecond before. The blade cut through the bulkhead like it was paper. Okay, now they have lightsabers. Of course they have lightsabers. Technically, those are plasma-based cutting implements designed for. Not the time, Data. Shuttle bay doors are open. I suggest rapid evacuation. Peter didn't need to be told twice. He fired webbing at the doorframe and yanked himself through just as multiple energy blades converged on his position. He hit the shuttle bay deck in a roll, Data right behind him, and the android immediately sealed the doors. The shuttle bay was vast, easily 3 times larger than any hangar Peter had seen on Earth. Multiple shuttlecraft sat in neat rows, sleek vessels that looked more like advanced jets than traditional spacecraft. Emergency lights bathed everything in crimson. "That won't hold them long," Peter said, already hearing the sound of energy blades cutting through reinforced doors. "Agreed. We require transport immediately." Data ran to the nearest shuttle, a boxy craft with Galileo stenciled on its hull. "This Type 6 shuttle has sufficient speed and maneuverability for our purposes." Peter followed, his spider sense already warning him that the doors wouldn't hold more than another 30 seconds. They climbed into the shuttle, and Peter was struck by how similar yet different it was from aircraft he'd been in. The controls looked intuitive, obviously designed for humanoid operation, but covered in displays showing information he couldn't begin to interpret. Data's hands flew across the console. Initializing launch sequence. Depressurizing shuttle bay. Opening exterior doors. Wait, depressurizing? As in removing all the air. The shuttle has its own life support. We will be unaffected. Data's fingers continued their blur of motion. However, the Borg will be expelled into space when the bay doors open. It will provide us with a tactical advantage of approximately 4.7 seconds. The shuttle hummed to life, lifting smoothly off the deck. Through the viewport, Peter saw the massive bay doors beginning to open, revealing the star field beyond, and the Borg cube, hanging in space like a dark monument to assimilation. The Borg finally breached the shuttle bay entrance just as the last of the air evacuated. 7 drones stumbled into vacuum, their mechanical components allowing them to survive but stripping away their mobility advantage. They tumbled into space, grasping futilely as the Galileo shot past them. "Punch it, Data." "That is not the correct terminology, but I understand your intent." The shuttle's engines flared, and Peter was pressed back into his seat as they accelerated. The Enterprise grew smaller behind them, phaser fire still erupting from its hull as it fought off the Borg invasion. Peter's spider sense suddenly exploded with warning. "Data. I am aware. The cube is targeting us." Green beams of energy lanced out from the cube, each one precisely calculated to intersect with the Galileo's flight path. Data's hands moved across the controls with mechanical precision, banking and rolling the shuttle in ways that shouldn't be possible for a craft this size. Each beam missed by mere meters. "Your piloting skills are incredible," Peter said, gripping his seat as the shuttle inverted. "I am capable of processing 17 million calculations per second. However, the Borg can process significantly more. They are predicting my evasive patterns and adapting their targeting solutions." Another beam passed close enough that Peter could see the shuttle's shields flare. "We have perhaps 90 seconds before they successfully lock onto us." Peter's mind raced. They needed to draw the cube away from the Enterprise, but how? The Borg wanted him specifically, that was the key. If he could make himself an irresistible target. "Data, those spatial distortions you mentioned, the dimensional breaches forming throughout the ship. Are any of them out here in open space?" Data's eyes widened fractionally, his version of surprise. "Yes. I am detecting 3 significant distortions within this sector. The closest is approximately 200,000 kilometers from our current position." "How close would we need to get for the Borg to detect it?" Given their sensor capabilities, they would detect any significant dimensional anomaly at approximately 50,000 kilometers. Data turned to look at Peter. "You wish to use the distortion as bait. Better than that. I want to use it as a weapon." Peter's spider sense was still pinging warnings about the cube's attacks, but his mind was working through the possibilities. "When I touched that dimensional breach back in the Jeffries tube, I could feel the instability. My spider sense connected with it somehow, let me interact with the quantum frequencies. What if I could do that on a larger scale? You would risk being pulled into another dimension. Or worse, you could destabilize the breach entirely, causing a catastrophic dimensional collapse that could destroy everything within several thousand kilometers. Yeah, but it might also hurt the Borg cube. And if we can damage it enough, maybe the Enterprise can finish the job. Data was silent for 2.3 seconds, an eternity for an android. Your plan has a 73.6% chance of resulting in our deaths and a 12.4% chance of successfully damaging the cube. The remaining scenarios involve various degrees of dimensional catastrophe. So you're saying there's a chance? That is not what Data stopped, his head tilting. You are employing humor to mask fear. It is a common human psychological defense mechanism. It's also the only thing keeping me from completely freaking out right now. Peter looked at the Borg cube on the view screen. It was pursuing them, implacable and inevitable, and behind it the Enterprise was still fighting a losing battle. Data, I didn't ask to come here. I didn't ask for any of this. But now that I'm here, and these people, your people, are in danger because of me, I have to do something. That's who I am. That's who Spider-Man is. Behind them, through subspace communications they couldn't hear, the Borg Collective made its calculations. The dimensional distortion ahead represented unknown variables. The entity known as Spider-Man had demonstrated an ability to interact with transdimensional phenomena. Logic dictated they were attempting to use the distortion as a weapon or escape route. The Collective adjusted its strategy. 12 drones would remain on the Enterprise to complete assimilation. The cube would pursue the shuttle, eliminate Spider-Man, and then return to claim his corpse for study. The dimensional distortion represented a potential threat, but the Borg had assimilated 17 species with transdimensional technology. They would adapt. They always adapted. What the Borg Collective couldn't account for, was that Peter Parker had spent his entire adult life being underestimated. It was his secret weapon, the ace up his sleeve, the thing that had let him triumph against gods and monsters. Nobody ever expected the friendly neighborhood Spider-Man to be the most dangerous person in the room. And this neighborhood was about to get a lot less friendly. The dimensional distortion hung in space like a wound in reality itself. Through the Galileo's viewport, Peter could see it, a swirling vortex of colors that shouldn't exist, where the laws of physics became suggestions and space-time folded in on itself like origami designed by something that had never seen three-dimensional geometry. We are approaching the distortion at 1/4 impulse, Data reported. The Borg cube is maintaining pursuit at a distance of 47,000 kilometers. They will be within weapons range in approximately 42 seconds. Peter unbuckled from his seat, his spider sense already reaching out toward the breach. Even from this distance, he could feel it, a wrongness that made his enhanced senses scream. How close can we get without the shuttle being torn apart? The gravitational shear at the distortion's edge would destroy the Galileo at approximately 500 meters. However, our shields can maintain integrity at 800 meters for a maximum of 90 seconds before cascade failure. Then get us to 800 meters and hold position. Peter moved to the shuttle's rear hatch. I'm going outside. Data's head swiveled with mechanical precision. That is inadvisable. The dimensional radiation alone could cause cellular degradation, and the Borg will target you the moment you exit the shuttle. They're going to target me anyway. At least this way, I'll have room to maneuver. Peter examined the hatch controls, his genius-level intellect parsing the Federation technology faster than he'd expected. Some of it was intuitive, open, close, pressure seals. Besides, my spider sense is already adapting to the dimensional frequency. I can feel it. Whatever came through that breach back on the Enterprise, it changed something in me. Made me more attuned to this stuff. That would explain why you survived direct contact with the Jeffries tube anomaly. Data's fingers moved across his console. I am detecting subtle quantum fluctuations in your biosignature. You are becoming a dimensional anchor point, a fixed reference in multiversal constants. Is that good or bad? Unknown. The phenomenon has only been theoretically documented in 3 species across Federation records, none of whom survived long enough for comprehensive study. Okay, definitely not sharing that information with my spider sense. It's paranoid enough already. Peter found an environmental suit locker. Please tell me you have space suits on this thing. Environmental suits are standard equipment. However, they are designed for Federation species physiological parameters. Your enhanced metabolism may find them. Peter was already pulling on the suit. It was surprisingly flexible, made of some material that felt like fabric but displayed readouts across its surface. The helmet sealed with a hiss, and Peter's breathing echoed in his ears. Okay, this is weird but functional. How do I look? The suit appears to fit adequately, though the biometric readings are indicating stress on the environmental controls due to your enhanced oxygen requirements. Data adjusted something on his console. I have increased the suit's life support by 40%. You should have approximately 23 minutes of oxygen. 23 minutes to save the day. Story of my life. Peter moved to the hatch. Data, when I'm out there, I need you to do something that's probably against every safety protocol you have. Please elaborate. When I tell you, and only when I tell you, I need you to drop the shuttle's shields completely for exactly 3 seconds, then raise them again. Can you do that? Data's expression, or what passed for expression on an android face, showed something like concern. Dropping shields while under Borg attack would expose the shuttle to catastrophic damage. The probability of our destruction increases to 94.2%. I know. But I'm going to need to interact with the distortion on a level that shields will interfere with. And the only way to make the Borg think they've won is to give them a clear shot. Peter's hand rested on the hatch control. Trust me, Data. I've been doing this superhero thing for a while now. Sometimes the crazy plan is the only plan that works. Data processed this for exactly 1.7 seconds. Very well. I will monitor your position and drop shields on your command. However, I feel compelled to note that Captain Picard will be extremely displeased if I allow you to die. Then I guess I better not die. Peter opened the hatch, and the shuttle's atmosphere immediately began venting into the sealed chamber. A second hatch opened to space, and Peter looked out at the dimensional distortion, the Borg cube bearing down on them, and the infinite star field beyond. He'd web-slung between skyscrapers hundreds of times. He'd fought in space before, during that crazy incident with the Chitauri invasion. But this was different. This was the final frontier, and he was just a kid from Queens who'd been bitten by a radioactive spider. Peter Parker took a deep breath and jumped into the void. The silence was absolute. No wind, no sound, nothing but his own breathing and the faint hum of the environmental suit's systems. Peter fired webbing at the shuttle's hull, using it as an anchor line as he oriented himself toward the distortion. His spider sense exploded with information, the Borg cube's weapons charging, the gravitational shear from the distortion pulling at him, the dimensional radiation washing over his body like waves of wrongness. But underneath it all, he could feel the frequency. The pulse of reality breaking down and rebuilding itself, over and over, in a rhythm that his enhanced senses could almost comprehend. The Borg cube opened fire. Green energy beams lanced through space, each one targeting the spot where Peter floated. But his spider sense saw them coming, gave him the split-second warning he needed to fire webbing and yank himself aside. The beams passed through empty space where he'd been. They have increased firing rate by 340%, Data's voice came through the suit's comm system. You have 11 seconds before pattern recognition allows them to predict your movements. Then I better work fast. Peter released his anchor line, using small bursts from the suit's maneuvering thrusters, technology he barely understood but his instincts guided him through, to position himself between the shuttle and the distortion. The dimensional breach was massive up close, easily 200 meters across. Through its swirling colors, Peter could see fragments of other realities, a version of Earth where the sky was purple, a vast mechanical structure that might have been a Dyson sphere, and something that looked disturbingly organic, like the interior of some cosmic creature. Peter extended his hand toward the breach, letting his spider sense connect with the dimensional frequency. Pain shot through his arm, reality itself rejecting his presence, but he pushed through it. His enhanced healing fought against the dimensional radiation, each cell in his body adapting, evolving, becoming something that could exist between universes. "Peter, the Borg are charging a more powerful weapon," Data warned. "They will fire in 6 seconds. "Not yet," Peter gritted out. His hand was inside the distortion now, his entire arm vibrating at frequencies that shouldn't be possible for solid matter. He could feel the dimensional barriers, could sense how thin they were here, how easily they could be torn. "I need them closer. I need a clear shot at the cube. They are now within optimal weapons range. 5 seconds. Peter's spider sense showed him the attack before it came, a massive beam, far more powerful than anything they'd fired before. Enough energy to vaporize the shuttle, to kill Data, to end this entire crazy plan. But it was also exactly what he needed. "Data. Drop shields now. Shields down." The universe seemed to slow. Peter could see the energy building in the Borg cube's weapons array, could feel Data's absolute trust in his plan despite the 94.2% chance of death. His spider sense painted a picture of the next 3 seconds in perfect clarity. Peter yanked his hand out of the dimensional distortion and thrust it toward the Borg cube. His entire body was vibrating now, resonating with transdimensional energy. When he fired webbing, it wasn't just synthetic polymer, it was something more, something changed by its passage through his dimensionally altered body. The webbing shot across the void, impossibly fast, impossibly accurate. It struck the Borg cube's weapon array just as they fired their devastating beam. And the dimensional energy Peter had channeled into the webbing created a connection, a bridge between the cube and the distortion. Reality screamed. The Borg's energy beam didn't just fire, it was redirected, pulled through the dimensional bridge Peter had created. The beam curved in space, bending in ways that violated every law of physics, and slammed back into the cube itself. But it wasn't just their own energy returning. It was that energy mixed with dimensional radiation, with fragments of other realities, with the raw chaos of the multiverse. The cube's shields adapted instantly, compensating for the energy feedback. But shields couldn't adapt to the fundamental laws of reality being rewritten. The dimensional radiation tore into the cube's hull, and Peter could see, with senses he shouldn't possess, the Borg inside experiencing catastrophic system failures as spacetime itself became unstable around them. "Shields up!" Peter shouted. Data's hands moved, and the shuttle's shield snapped back into place exactly 2.97 seconds after they'd dropped. A piece of debris from the cube struck the shields and deflected harmlessly away. The Borg cube was wounded but not destroyed. Sections of its hull were phasing in and out of reality, drones inside being torn apart by dimensional shear. But the collective was already adapting, routing power away from damaged sections, compensating for the dimensional instability. "It's not enough," Peter said, watching the cube begin to stabilize. His entire body ached, his cells screaming from the dimensional stress. "They're adapting too fast. We hurt them, but..." "Peter," Data interrupted, and there was something in his voice that made Peter look at the android's face on the shuttle's internal monitor. "Look at the Enterprise." Peter turned, using the suit's enhanced visual sensors to zoom in on the Federation starship. The Borg drones that had been swarming its hull were gone, either destroyed or recalled to the cube. And the Enterprise's shields were back at full strength, its weapons arrays charging. Captain Picard's voice suddenly came through on the comm channel, calm and commanding despite the battle they'd just endured. "Well done, Mr. Parker, Mr. Data. The Borg have recalled their forces to their cube to manage the dimensional damage. You've given us the opening we needed." A pause. "All hands, this is the captain. Target the cube's compromised sections. Fire at will." The Enterprise unleashed everything. Phaser arrays, photon torpedoes, and weapons Peter didn't have names for. Each shot targeted the sections of the cube Peter had destabilized, exploiting the weakness his dimensional attack had created. The Borg adapted, their shields compensating, but they were fighting on two fronts now, against the Enterprise's weapons and against the dimensional instability tearing them apart from within. Even the Collective's vast processing power had limits. One section of the cube exploded, venting atmosphere and drones into space. Then another. The geometric perfection of the Borg vessel began to fragment, its systematic efficiency crumbling under the combined assault. The cube is attempting to open a transwarp conduit, Data reported. They are retreating. A green vortex opened in space, and the damaged cube limped toward it, still firing at the Enterprise even as it withdrew. The last thing Peter saw before the cube vanished was a message broadcast on all frequencies, the cold mechanical voice of the Collective. Spider-Man. Your biological distinctiveness has been catalogued. We will adapt. When we return, resistance will be futile. Then the cube was gone, the transwarp conduit collapsing behind it. Peter floated in space, his body exhausted, his spider sense finally quieting to a dull background hum. They'd won. Somehow, impossibly, they'd driven off the Borg. But he knew this wasn't over. The Collective didn't forget. They didn't forgive. They would return, and next time they'd be ready for everything he could throw at them. Peter, I am bringing you back inside, Data said. Your oxygen reserves are at 14%, and your bio readings suggest you are approaching physical collapse. Yeah, Peter managed. That sounds about right. As the shuttle's robotic arm carefully retrieved him and pulled him back into the safety of the Galileo, Peter looked out at the stars one last time. He'd saved these people, at least for now. He'd made a difference in a universe that wasn't even his own. But as his consciousness began to fade, his spider sense whispered one final warning: this was just the beginning. The dimensional barriers were still weak. More things would come through. And somewhere out there, the Borg were already analyzing what had happened, already adapting. The game had changed. And Peter Parker was going to need more than just webs and spider sense to survive what came next. Peter woke in sickbay to the soft hum of medical equipment and the concerned face of Dr. Crusher hovering above him. For a moment, disorientation gripped him. This wasn't his apartment, wasn't the Avengers' medical bay, wasn't anywhere he recognized. Then memory flooded back: dimensional breach, Borg cube, spacewalk with dimensional radiation. Easy, Crusher said, placing a gentle hand on his shoulder as he tried to sit up. You've been unconscious for 4 hours. Your body underwent significant stress from the dimensional exposure. Did we win? Peter's throat was dry, his voice raspy. Is the Enterprise okay? The Enterprise is intact, and the Borg have withdrawn. Thanks in large part to your rather creative use of transdimensional physics. Crusher held up a medical tricorder, scanning him with practiced efficiency. However, you've paid a price. Your cellular structure is showing signs of quantum flux. Nothing immediately dangerous, but your body is still processing the dimensional radiation. Peter looked at his hands. They appeared normal, but when he concentrated, he could almost see them flickering, like a hologram losing coherence for microseconds at a time. Am I becoming unstable? Like that creature in the Jeffries tube? No. You're adapting. Crusher pulled up a holographic display showing his DNA structure. Your enhanced healing factor is remarkable. Instead of breaking down under dimensional stress, your cells are incorporating the quantum fluctuations into their normal function. You're becoming attuned to dimensional variance. So I'm turning into a dimensional anchor, like Data said. More than that. A new voice spoke from the sickbay entrance. Captain Picard entered, his uniform showing scorch marks from the battle but his bearing as composed as ever. You're becoming a bridge between realities. The first human, perhaps the first being in Federation history, capable of consciously interacting with the dimensional barriers. Peter swung his legs off the bio bed, testing his strength. His spider sense was different now, sharper, more attuned to things beyond just physical danger. He could sense the dimensional distortions still present throughout this region of space, could feel them like pressure points against his consciousness. That sounds impressive and terrifying in equal measure. An apt description. Picard gestured for Peter to follow. Walk with me, Mr. Parker. We need to discuss your situation. They left sickbay, moving through corridors where crew members were still conducting repairs. Several nodded respectfully to Peter as they passed, and he realized word of his actions had spread throughout the ship. He felt simultaneously proud and uncomfortable with the attention. The Borg will return, Picard said without preamble once they were in the turbolift. They always do. They've catalogued your abilities, analyzed your dimensional interaction, and are undoubtedly developing countermeasures as we speak. I know. My spider sense is still picking up echoes. Like they left some kind of marker on me. Peter flexed his hands, remembering the cold mechanical precision of the collective's pursuit. They called me Spider-Man by name. That means they got into my head somehow. Surface thoughts during your initial transport, most likely. The Borg are efficient at data extraction. The turbolift doors opened onto Deck 8, and Picard led Peter toward a set of secure doors. Which brings us to our current problem. Starfleet Command has been briefed on your arrival and the subsequent Borg encounter. They have questions. The doors opened into a conference room where several officers waited. Riker stood by the window, arms crossed. Worf was present, his Klingon features set in a scowl. Data sat at the table, and beside him was a woman Peter hadn't met, dark-skinned with a Starfleet uniform and an air of quiet intensity. Mr. Parker, this is Commander Deanna Troi, the ship's counselor and a betazoid empath, Picard introduced. She can sense emotions and has been attempting to understand the psychological impact of your displacement. Troi stepped forward, her expression compassionate. Mr. Parker, I can sense your fear and confusion, but also a deep sense of responsibility. You're worried about getting home, but you're more worried about the danger your presence has brought to this crew. Peter tried to put up his mental defenses. Years of dealing with telepaths back home had taught him some tricks, but Troy's empathy seemed to slip past them like they weren't there. Yeah, well, that's kind of my thing. Guilt and responsibility. Spider-Man's greatest hits. The question before us, Riker said, turning from the window, is what we do with you. Starfleet wants you brought to a secure facility for study. Not as a prisoner, he added quickly, seeing Peter tense, but they believe understanding your dimensional properties could be crucial to preventing future incursions. They want to lock me in a lab and run tests. Peter's voice was flat. He'd heard this song before, from S.H.I.E.L.D., from the government, from well-meaning scientists who saw him as a specimen rather than a person. Not lock you up, Picard said firmly. Starfleet is not in the business of imprisonment without cause. But they do want to understand how you interact with dimensional phenomena. And frankly, so do I. Those distortions are still present throughout this sector. More entities could come through at any time. Peter's spider sense pinged softly, confirming Picard's assessment. The dimensional barriers were fragile here, and his very presence seemed to be making them worse, or perhaps just more noticeable. What if I'm the problem? What if bringing me here destabilized everything? That is a possibility we must consider, Data said. However, preliminary analysis suggests the dimensional instability predates your arrival. The subspace rupture that brought you here was a symptom, not a cause. Something is weakening the barriers between universes in this region of space. Something or someone, Worf growled. The Borg's timing was too precise. They detected the distortion and moved to exploit it. Which suggests they were monitoring dimensional activity. Troy's eyes widened slightly. You think the Borg caused this? Not the Borg, Peter said, his spider sense suddenly screaming a warning. Everyone turned to look at him. Something else. Something that wanted me here specifically. He pressed his hand to his temple, trying to make sense of the fragmented impressions his enhanced senses were feeding him. When I touched that distortion in the Jeffries tube, I felt intent. Purpose. Like something on the other side was reaching through, trying to grab something from this universe. Or someone, Picard said quietly. The conference room door suddenly chimed. Come, Picard called. A young ensign entered, her face pale. Captain, we're receiving a transmission. Origin point is, it's coming from inside one of the dimensional distortions. The message is specifically addressed to Spider-Man. The room went silent. Peter felt his spider sense spike, danger and opportunity mixing in equal measure. Put it through. Data accessed the conference room's view screen, and an image appeared that made Peter's blood run cold. It wasn't a face, it was a symbol. A red hourglass against a black background, rotating slowly. And beneath it, text in English. Spider. The web connects all realities. Follow the thread. Come home. Or watch this universe burn. The message repeated, the hourglass spinning hypnotically. Peter stared at it, his mind racing. The red hourglass, it was familiar, connected to his rogues gallery. But which one? Whose symbol was this? That appears to be a threat, Worf stated unnecessarily. It's more than that, Peter said, stepping closer to the screen. It's a challenge. Someone from my universe, or a version of my universe, is here. And they're using the dimensional instability as leverage. Can you identify the sender? Picard asked. Peter studied the hourglass, letting his spider sense probe the transmission. There was something in the quantum signature, something that resonated with his own abilities. I have suspicions. But none of them are good. The hourglass symbol is associated with several of my enemies, and all of them are seriously dangerous. Then we have a choice to make, Riker said. We can take you to Starfleet Command as ordered, let them study you and develop a response. Or we follow the threat to its source, Picard finished. Track the transmission and confront whoever is behind this before they can make good on their promise to burn this universe. Troy leaned forward. Captain, if this is a trap, and it almost certainly is, we'd be walking directly into it. Agreed. Which is why we need more information. Picard turned to Data. Commander, can you trace that transmission? Data's fingers flew across the console. The signal originated from a dimensional distortion approximately 3 light-years from our current position. However, the distortion is significantly larger than the others we've encountered, approximately 10 kilometers in diameter. And it's stable, suggesting it's being artificially maintained. Someone built a dimensional doorway, Peter said. And they're inviting me to walk through it. You cannot seriously be considering this, Worf said, directing his words at Picard. This is clearly a trap designed to capture or eliminate Mr. Parker. Of course it's a trap, Peter agreed. But it's also information. Someone went to a lot of trouble to pull me into this universe, to position the Borg to find me, and now to issue this challenge. They want something from me, and until I know what, everyone in this universe is in danger. Picard studied Peter with those penetrating eyes, and Peter had the distinct impression he was being measured against some internal standard. Finally, the captain nodded. Mr. Parker is correct. Ignoring this threat won't make it disappear. However, I won't order my crew into obvious danger without proper preparation. I'll go alone, Peter said immediately. Absolutely not, Picard replied with such firmness that Peter actually took a step back. You're under my protection, Mr. Parker. That means you don't face threats alone, no matter how noble your intentions. Besides, you need support, people who understand this universe's technology and can provide tactical backup. I will accompany him, Data volunteered. My android physiology makes me resistant to most dimensional effects, and I have proven capable of working effectively with Mr. Parker. As will I, Worf added, surprising Peter. The Klingon's expression was stern but respectful. You fight with honor, Spider-Man. It would be my privilege to stand with you in battle. Troy placed a hand on Peter's arm. And I can help you navigate whatever psychological warfare they attempt. Empaths can be useful against manipulators. Peter felt something tighten in his chest, gratitude, affection, the overwhelming sensation of not being alone. Back home, he'd worked with teams before, but he'd always been the odd one out, the street-level hero playing in the big leagues. Here, these people who barely knew him were offering to walk into danger at his side. "Thank you," he said quietly. "All of you." Picard tapped his communicator. "Bridge, this is the captain. Set course for the coordinates. Commander data is uploading. Maximum warp. We have a dimensional anomaly to investigate." "Captain," came the response from the bridge, "Starfleet Command has ordered us to proceed to Starbase 234 with our guest. They've been quite insistent. Inform Starfleet Command that we've encountered a significant threat to Federation security and are investigating under first contact protocols. We'll report when we have more information." Picard's tone suggested the matter was closed. "And remind them that I'm still the captain of this vessel." He turned to Peter. "You have 3 hours before we reach the distortion. I suggest you use that time to rest, resupply your web shooters with Data's help, and prepare for whatever awaits us. Because make no mistake, Mr. Parker, we're about to walk into the spider's web. Let's make sure we're the ones who come out victorious." As the meeting dispersed and officers moved to their stations, Peter stood alone for a moment in the conference room, staring at the rotating hourglass on the screen. His spider sense was still screaming warnings, but beneath the danger, he felt something else: purpose. Whoever had brought him here, whatever game they were playing, Peter Parker was going to face it head-on. Because that's what Spider-Man did. He didn't run from responsibility. He didn't hide from threats. And he sure as hell didn't let innocent people suffer because villains wanted to play multiversal chess. "Okay, mystery villain," Peter muttered to the screen. "You wanted Spider-Man. You got him. Let's see if you can handle the full web-slinging, wisecracking, dimensionally unstable package." The hourglass continued to spin, counting down to a confrontation that would determine the fate of this universe, and possibly every universe connected to it. The next 3 hours passed in a blur of preparation. Data helped Peter synthesize new web fluid using the Enterprise's replicators, adjusting the chemical formula to account for this universe's slightly different molecular constants. The result was webbing that was actually stronger than his original formula, a side effect of Federation matter synthesis technology. "Your web shooters are remarkably efficient," Data observed as they worked in engineering. "The compression ratio alone suggests principles that Federation materials science has yet to fully explore. May I ask how you developed this technology?" "Trial and error, mostly. A lot of late nights in my apartment, nearly blowing myself up a few times." Peter loaded fresh cartridges into his web shooters. "Back home, I couldn't exactly go to Stark Industries and ask for lab time. Had to make do with what I could afford on a freelance photographer's salary." "You are a photographer?" "Was. AM. I don't know anymore." Peter's expression clouded. "I had a life back there. A job, people who depended on me. Aunt May must be worried sick. MJ probably thinks I'm dead or got kidnapped by some supervillain again." He laughed bitterly. Which, technically, might be true. Data tilted his head in that characteristic way. "You miss them. More than I can explain." Peter flexed his fingers, watching them flicker almost imperceptibly with dimensional instability. "But right now, the best thing I can do for them is make sure whoever brought me here doesn't hurt anyone else. If there's even a chance I can get home after this, I have to take it." Worf entered engineering carrying a weapons case. "Spider-Man. I have brought equipment that may prove useful." He opened the case to reveal several devices Peter didn't recognize, cylindrical objects covered in Klingon script and what looked like modified phasers. "What are these?" "Portable shield generators, adapted from Klingon design. They will provide temporary protection against energy weapons and physical attacks. Worf handed one to Peter. Attach it to your belt. When activated, it will create a personal deflector field for approximately 30 seconds. Use it wisely, it requires 5 minutes to recharge. Peter examined the device, his mechanical aptitude letting him understand the basic principles despite the alien technology. This is incredible. Thank you, Worf. The Klingon's expression softened slightly. You fought well against the Borg. You have earned the respect of a warrior. He paused. There is a Klingon saying, 4,000 throats may be cut in one night by a running man. You are small, fast, and unpredictable. These are the qualities of a successful warrior. Do not discount them. Before Peter could respond, the ship's intercom crackled. All hands, this is the captain. We are approaching the dimensional distortion. Senior staff and away team, report to transporter room 3. Peter's spider sense immediately spiked. Whatever waited on the other side of that distortion, it was dangerous beyond anything he'd faced so far. But beneath the danger, he sensed something else, answers. Whoever had sent that message knew why he was here. And Peter Parker was done being a pawn in someone else's game. The transporter room was smaller than Peter expected, with a circular pad marked by glowing lights and a control console where Chief O'Brien, an engineer Peter had been briefly introduced to, worked with focused intensity. Picard, Data, Worf, and Troy were already present, along with 2 security officers Peter didn't recognize. Status, Mr. O'Brien? Picard asked. The distortion's stable, Captain, but it's like nothing I've ever seen. The quantum variance is off the charts, and I'm reading multiple dimensional signatures overlapping. It's not just a doorway to another universe, it's a nexus point. Multiple realities bleeding together. Peter stepped onto the transporter pad, his spider sense painting a picture of swirling chaos beyond the normal bounds of space. Can you get us through safely? O'Brien's expression was uncertain. I can get you to the distortion's edge. After that, you're in uncharted territory. The pattern buffers might not be able to lock onto you for retrieval if the dimensional flux is too severe. So we might be stuck there, Riker said from where he stood near the captain. He'd insisted on staying aboard the Enterprise to command the ship in Picard's absence, a compromise that satisfied no one but was tactically sound. We'll manage, Peter said with more confidence than he felt. I can sense the dimensional currents now. If we need to find our way back, I can guide us. Picard stepped onto the pad beside Peter. Chief, energize when ready. And Mr. O'Brien, if we're not back in 1 hour, follow contingency protocol Omega. Inform Starfleet Command of everything we've discovered and recommend a full investigation of dimensional instabilities throughout this sector. Aye, Captain. O'Brien's hands moved across the console. Energizing. Peter had been transported before, Stark's teleportation tech, various magical portals, even a few accidental trips through Asgardian Bifrost. But this was different. Instead of the instantaneous relocation he expected, he felt himself dissolving slowly, his consciousness expanding across multiple dimensions simultaneously. For a brief, terrifying moment, he existed in several realities at once. He saw the Enterprise from outside, a graceful starship against the void. He saw his own apartment in New York, empty and waiting. He saw versions of himself, other Spider-Men from other realities, each one fighting their own battles. And he saw something else, a vast web of connections linking every universe together, with himself at one of the key intersection points. Then reality snapped back into focus, and Peter materialized in a place that defied description. They stood on what appeared to be a platform floating in infinite space. But this wasn't normal space, the stars were wrong, moving in patterns that hurt to watch. Colors that didn't exist in standard three-dimensional reality swirled around them, and the platform itself seemed to be made of solidified probability, shifting between different materials every few seconds. Fascinating, Data said, his tricorder working overtime. We are inside the dimensional distortion. The physical laws here are in constant flux. Gravity is being artificially generated, as is breathable atmosphere. Someone constructed this place specifically as a meeting ground. Worf had his phaser drawn, scanning their surroundings with tactical precision. I am reading multiple life signs, but they are not consistent. They appear and disappear as if phasing in and out of existence. Troy pressed her hand to her temple, her expression strained. I sense overwhelming emotion. Fear, anger, desperation. But it's not coming from one source, it's everywhere, as if the space itself is saturated with psychological residue. Peter's spider sense was going haywire, danger signals coming from every direction and no direction simultaneously. Then it crystallized, focusing on a single point ahead of them. Someone's coming. A figure materialized on the platform, and Peter's heart sank. He recognized that silhouette, that posture, that particular shade of green and purple. "Hello, Peter," said Norman Osborn, though his voice carried harmonics that suggested this wasn't entirely Norman. Or should I say, Spider-Man? It's been far too long since we had a proper chat. And this time, there's no universe for you to hide in. But as the figure stepped fully into view, Peter realized this wasn't the Norman Osborn he knew. This version was different, his skin had a faint metallic sheen, his eyes glowed with an inner light that wasn't entirely organic, and around him swirled fragments of what looked like Borg technology mixed with something else. Something magical. "You're not Norman," Peter said, his mind racing to understand what he was seeing. "You're something else wearing his face. Perceptive as always." The Norman thing smiled, and the expression was wrong in ways Peter couldn't articulate. "I am what Norman Osborn became when he was assimilated by the Borg and then freed himself through sheer force of will. I am what happens when human ambition merges with collective consciousness and refuses to submit. I am the Green King, and I have been searching the multiverse for you, Peter. Because you're the key to everything." Picard stepped forward, his command presence never wavering despite the surreal environment. "I am Captain Jean-Luc Picard of the USS Enterprise. You've threatened this universe and endangered my crew. I demand to know your intentions." The Green King's attention shifted to Picard, and his smile widened. "Ah, the famous Captain Picard. The Borg remember you. WhatIf. The one who was assimilated and freed, just as I was. We have more in common than you realize." He turned back to Peter. "But this isn't about Captain Picard or his quaint little federation. This is about the web, Peter. The great cosmic web that connects all realities, all dimensions, all possibilities." "What web?" Peter demanded, though his spider sense was already showing him threads of connection between universes, pathways through the dimensional barriers, and at several critical junctions, beings like himself. Dimensional anchors. "What are you talking about?" "The web of life and destiny," the Green King said, spreading his arms as the space around them shifted. Images appeared in the swirling colors, other spider people, other heroes, other versions of reality. "You've sensed it before, haven't you? During the convergence, during your encounters with other Spider-Men. You're not just Peter Parker from one universe. You're a nexus point, a spider at the center of an infinite web. And I need that power." Data's tricorder beeped urgently. "Captain, he is correct. Mr. Parker's quantum signature is resonating with dimensional barriers throughout known space. He is, quite literally, connected to multiple realities simultaneously. Which is why I brought you here," the Green King continued. "This universe's dimensional barriers are weak, deliberately weakened by my efforts over the past several years. I've been preparing, you see. Studying the Borg's transdimensional technology, absorbing their knowledge of parallel universes, and searching for the perfect tool to tear down the walls between realities entirely." "Why?" Troy asked, her empathic senses clearly struggling with the Green King's twisted emotional state. "What could you possibly gain from destroying the barriers between universes?" "Power, Counselor. Absolute power." The Green King's eyes blazed. In my home universe, I was defeated. Humiliated. But then the Borg came, and in their collective, I found something better than victory. I found infinite potential. When I freed myself from their hive mind, I took their technology with me. And I realized that individual universes are prisons. Why rule one world when you could rule infinite worlds? Why be the Green Goblin of one reality when you could be the Green King of all realities? Peter felt his spider sense crystallize into terrible understanding. You're going to use me to collapse the dimensional barriers. Use my connection to the web of life and destiny to merge all realities into one chaotic mess that you can control. Not collapse. Merge. Unite under one consciousness. One will. Mine. The Green King gestured, and Borg drones began materializing around the platform, but these weren't normal drones. They flickered with the same dimensional instability that Peter possessed, phasing between solid and incorporeal. I've spent years creating a new collective. Not the sterile, logical Borg you know, but something better. A hive mind with ambition. With creativity. With the ability to assimilate entire realities. Worf raised his phaser, but the Green King laughed. Please, Lieutenant. Your weapons are useless here. I've studied Federation technology thoroughly. I know every countermeasure, every tactical response. The Borg learned much from Picard during his time as Locutus, and I learned everything from them. Then you understand that the Borg's greatest weakness is their predictability, Picard said calmly. They adapt to known threats, but struggle with genuine creativity and unpredictability. And if there's one thing Mr. Parker has taught me in our brief acquaintance, it's that unpredictability can triumph over seemingly insurmountable odds. The Green King's smile faltered slightly. Is that so? Well then, Captain. Let's test that theory. He snapped his fingers, and the dimensional phasing drones attacked. But as they moved, Peter's spider sense showed him something crucial: their phasing wasn't random. It followed patterns, quantum algorithms inherited from Borg Collective thinking. They were predictable in their unpredictability. Data, Worf. The drones phase every 3.7 seconds. Time your attacks. Peter launched himself into the air, firing webbing that he deliberately charged with dimensional energy from his own unstable quantum state. When the webbing hit a drone mid-phase, it solidified around the creature, locking it between dimensions. The drone shrieked, a sound of pure agony as it was torn apart by competing dimensional physics. Impossible, the Green King snarled. You shouldn't be able to. That's the thing about Spider-Man, Peter said, swinging past another drone and delivering a kick enhanced by his dimensional instability. His foot phased through the drone's armor and struck its organic components directly. I do a lot of things that should be impossible. It's kind of my brand. Picard, Data, Worf, and Troy moved with practiced efficiency, their tactics adapting to incorporate Peter's observations about the phasing patterns. Data's android precision allowed him to time his attacks perfectly. Worf's warrior instincts let him anticipate the drone's movements. Even Troy contributed, using her empathic abilities to sense which drones were about to phase and warning the others. But for every drone they defeated, the Green King created more, pulling them through dimensional breaches like a twisted summoner calling forth demons. This is pointless, the Green King roared. I have infinite realities to draw from. You can't defeat infinity. Maybe not, Peter said, his spider sense suddenly showing him something in the platform beneath their feet. Something important. But I don't need to defeat infinity. I just need to defeat you. He fired webbing at the Green King, who batted it aside contemptuously. But Peter had expected that, the webbing was a distraction. His real target was the platform itself, the dimensional anchor point that the Green King had created to stabilize this pocket universe. Peter's hands touched the platform's surface, and he let his dimensional instability flow into it, his quantum signature resonating with the artificial structure. He could feel the connections, the carefully constructed dimensional mathematics that kept this place stable. And with his spider sense guiding him, he began to pull those threads apart. The platform shuddered beneath their feet as Peter's dimensional instability spread through its structure like a virus. The Green King's eyes widened in genuine shock, perhaps the first true emotion Peter had seen from the twisted amalgamation of Norman Osborn and Borg technology. "What are you doing?" The Green King lunged forward, but Worf intercepted him, the Klingon's bat'leth clashing against the villain's cybernetic-enhanced strength. "He is destabilizing your dimensional anchor," Data said, his tricorder readings confirming Peter's actions. "By introducing his own quantum signature into the platform's matrix, he is creating cascading harmonic interference. The structure will collapse within 90 seconds. No." The Green King threw Worf aside with inhuman strength and rushed toward Peter. "You'll kill us all. This platform is the only thing keeping this dimensional nexus from collapsing into pure chaos." "I know," Peter said through gritted teeth, his entire body vibrating as he poured more of his dimensional energy into the platform. His spider sense was screaming warnings, showing him the catastrophic outcome of what he was doing. But it was also showing him something else, a way out, a thread in the web he could follow back to reality. "That's kind of the point. You built this place to trap me, to use me. But you made one mistake." "What mistake?" The Green King was almost upon him now, dimensional phasing drones converging from all directions. Peter looked up, his eyes meeting the Green King's, and smiled behind his mask. "You assumed I'd play by your rules." He released everything, every ounce of dimensional energy he'd been unconsciously storing since his arrival in this universe, every quantum fluctuation his enhanced cells had absorbed. His body became a beacon of transdimensional chaos, and the platform's carefully constructed stability shattered like glass. "Everyone, grab onto me!" Peter shouted. "Now!" Picard didn't hesitate. He trusted Peter's instinct, trusted the young man who had saved his ship and crew. He grabbed Peter's shoulder, and Data immediately grasped Picard's arm. Worf rolled toward them, his warrior reflexes allowing him to snatch Troy and pull her into the group even as the platform began to fragment beneath them. The Green King reached for Peter, his cybernetic hand extending toward the spider-themed hero's neck. "If I can't have you, then no universe will." But Peter's spider sense had seen this coming. He twisted at the last second, and the Green King's hand closed on empty air. Then the platform exploded into countless fragments, each piece tumbling away into different dimensions. For the second time in a matter of hours, Peter experienced existence across multiple realities simultaneously. But this time, he was ready. This time, he understood what he was seeing. The web of life and destiny stretched out before him in all its infinite complexity, countless universes connected by threads of probability and quantum entanglement, and at key intersection points, beings like himself. Dimensional anchors. Spider totems. He could see other versions of himself scattered throughout the multiverse. A Spider-Man in a noir universe, fighting crime in black and white. A Spider-Woman who had never lost her Uncle Ben. A Spider-Man who had become a villain. Thousands of variations, each one a thread in the greater web. And he could see the Green King, tumbling through the dimensional chaos, reaching desperately for purchase in any reality that would hold him. The villain's Borg enhancements allowed him to survive the transition, but his hybrid nature, neither fully organic nor fully mechanical, left him vulnerable to the dimensional shear. Peter watched as the Green King was pulled apart across multiple realities, his consciousness fragmenting as he was scattered through the multiverse. "Peter." Picard's voice cut through the dimensional noise. "We need a way back." Peter focused, using his spider sense to follow the thread that connected him to the Enterprise's universe. It was faint, almost imperceptible among the billions of other connections, but it was there. The quantum signature he developed during his time aboard the ship, the dimensional resonance that had formed between himself and this reality's physical constants. He pulled, not with his hands but with his will, with his connection to the web itself. And reality responded. They materialized in Transporter Room 3 in a cascade of dimensional energy that overloaded the transporter's pattern buffers and sent sparks flying from every console. O'Brien was thrown backward from the explosion, and emergency alarms immediately began wailing throughout the ship. Peter collapsed to his knees, his body finally reaching its limit. Every cell in his body felt like it had been stretched across infinite distances and then compressed back together. His spider sense was a dull, exhausted throb rather than its usual sharp warning system. Medical emergency, transporter room 3. Picard's voice was hoarse but commanding. He'd been through dimensional trauma himself during his assimilation, and he recognized the symptoms. Dr. Crusher, we need you immediately. Data helped Peter to a sitting position while Worf checked on the security officers who had accompanied them. Troy was shaking, her empathic abilities overwhelmed by the emotional resonance of traveling through the dimensional nexus, but she was alive and conscious. Mr. Parker, Data said, his golden eyes showing what might have been concern, your quantum signature has stabilized. You are no longer phasing between dimensions. Peter looked at his hands. They were solid, real, firmly anchored in this universe. Whatever had happened during his interaction with the platform, it had fundamentally changed his relationship with dimensional physics. He was no longer just visiting this reality, he was part of it now, as real here as he'd been in his home universe. The Green King? Peter asked, his voice barely a whisper. Scattered across the multiverse, Picard said. I saw him fragmenting, pulled apart by the dimensional currents. Whether any part of him survived is impossible to say. Dr. Crusher burst into the transporter room with a medical team. She immediately began scanning Peter, her tricorder painting a picture of a man who should be dead but was somehow still functioning. Get him to sickbay. Now. His cellular structure is barely holding together. I'm okay, Peter protested weakly, but his body betrayed him by collapsing completely. Data caught him before he hit the deck. You are not okay, Crusher said firmly. You just weaponized your own quantum instability to destroy a dimensional nexus. That kind of stress would kill most beings instantly. The fact that you're alive is miraculous, but you need immediate treatment. As they transported him to sickbay on an anti-grav stretcher, Peter's consciousness began to fade. But his spider sense was still working, still painting pictures in his mind. And what it showed him was both comforting and terrifying. The dimensional barriers in this sector were stabilizing. Without the Green King's artificial manipulation, reality was reasserting its normal structure. The distortions would fade, the breaches would seal, and this universe would be safe from transdimensional incursion. But Peter's connection to the web of life and destiny remained. He could still sense other realities, still feel the threads connecting infinite universes. And somewhere out there, scattered across the multiverse, fragments of the Green King were trying to reassemble themselves. This wasn't over. It would never be over. Because once you became aware of the multiverse, once you understood your place in the infinite web, you could never go back to seeing reality as simple or singular. Hours later, or perhaps days, Peter's sense of time had become unreliable. He woke in sickbay to find Picard sitting beside his biobed, reading a physical book. The captain looked up as Peter stirred. Welcome back, Mr. Parker. You've been unconscious for 18 hours. Peter tried to sit up, but his body protested. Everything ached in ways he didn't have words for. Did we win? That depends on how one defines victory. Picard set his book aside. The dimensional distortions are dissipating. Starfleet has deployed specialized teams to monitor the remaining instabilities, but they're confident the crisis has passed. The Borg cube we encountered has not returned, though we remain vigilant. And you, despite Dr. Crusher's predictions, appear to be recovering. What about the Green King? Is he really gone? Picard's expression grew thoughtful. Commander Data has been analyzing the sensor readings from our time in the dimensional nexus. His conclusion is that the entity you knew as the Green King was fragmented across approximately 47,000 parallel universes. Whether those fragments can eventually reunite is unknown. But for now, he poses no threat to this reality. Peter absorbed this information, his spider sense confirming Picard's assessment. The immediate danger had passed. But the Green King's words echoed in his mind. You're a nexus point, a spider at the center of an infinite web. Captain, I need to ask you something. And I need you to be honest with me. I have always been honest with you, Mr. Parker. Can I go home? Is there a way to return me to my universe? Picard was silent for a long moment. Truthfully, I don't know. Your quantum signature has become so intertwined with this reality that attempting to force a dimensional transition might destroy you. You've become, as Data put it, a dimensional anchor. You exist simultaneously in multiple realities but are now primarily bound to this one. So I'm stuck here. It wasn't a question. Perhaps. Or perhaps you've simply found a new home. Picard leaned forward. Peter, in my years as a captain, I've encountered many beings displaced from their proper time or universe. Some spent their lives desperately trying to return home. Others chose to make new lives in their adopted reality. Neither choice is wrong. But I would advise you to consider something. You've already made a difference here. You've saved lives, prevented catastrophes, and demonstrated qualities that Starfleet values highly. Are you offering me a job? I'm offering you a choice. You can work with Starfleet scientists to attempt to return home, though success is far from guaranteed. Or you can stay, join Starfleet, and use your unique abilities to help prevent future dimensional incursions. Your experience with the multiverse, your spider sense sensitivity to dimensional distortions, these would be invaluable assets. Peter's mind raced. Join Starfleet. Become part of this universe permanently. It was tempting in ways he hadn't expected. These people had shown him nothing but kindness and respect. They'd trusted him, fought beside him, and treated him as an equal despite his abilities being beyond their scientific understanding. But could he really give up on returning home? On seeing Aunt May again, on being with MJ, on protecting his version of New York? I need time to think about it, Peter said finally. Of course. You've been through an ordeal that would break most beings. Take all the time you need. Picard stood, preparing to leave. But Peter, whatever you decide, know that you have allies here. Friends. The Federation takes care of its own, and as far as I'm concerned, you've earned that designation. After Picard left, Peter lay in the biobed, staring at the ceiling and listening to the soft hum of the Enterprise's engines. His spider sense was quiet now, no longer screaming warnings of dimensional collapse or Borg attacks. Just a gentle awareness of his surroundings, of the life and activity throughout the massive starship. He thought about Uncle Ben, about the lesson that had defined his life. With great power comes great responsibility. But what responsibility did he have now? To his home universe, which might be inaccessible. Or to this universe, which needed protection from threats it barely understood. And then his spider sense pinged, not a danger warning, but an awareness. Someone was approaching sickbay. Multiple someones, carrying something that registered as non-threatening but unusual. The doors opened, and Data entered, followed by several crew members Peter recognized from engineering and the bridge. They were carrying what appeared to be a large covered tray. Mr. Parker, Data said with what might have been android enthusiasm, the crew wished to express their gratitude for your actions. As such, we have prepared something we believe you will appreciate. They uncovered the tray to reveal an enormous sandwich, easily 2 feet long, piled high with what looked like turkey, ham, roast beef, and at least 7 different cheeses. Beside it were multiple side dishes and what appeared to be 3 different types of dessert. We calculated your enhanced metabolism's caloric requirements, Data explained, and had the replicators produce sufficient nutrition to aid your recovery. Commander Riker suggested we call it the spider sandwich, though I am uncertain of the humor in that designation. Peter felt tears prick his eyes, not from sadness, but from the overwhelming gesture of kindness. These people barely knew him, yet they'd taken the time to care, to help, to show they valued him. Thank you, he said, his voice thick with emotion. This is perfect. As the crew members filed out, leaving him with enough food to feed a small army, Peter Parker made a decision. Maybe he couldn't go home right now. Maybe he was stuck in this universe for the foreseeable future. But if he was going to be here, he'd do what he always did, make a difference. Help people. Be a hero. Because whether he was in New York or on a starship exploring the galaxy, whether he was facing the Green Goblin or the Borg, Peter Parker was and always would be Spider-Man. And Spider-Man's responsibility wasn't limited to one universe. 2 weeks after the dimensional crisis, Peter stood in the Enterprise's observation lounge, watching stars streak past as the ship traveled at warp speed towards Starbase 84. He'd recovered physically from his ordeal, though Dr. Crusher still insisted on daily checkups to monitor his quantum signature. The dimensional instability had settled into what she called controlled fluctuation. His cells existed simultaneously in this universe and at the edges of several others, making him a permanent bridge between realities. It was both a gift and a curse. His spider sense was now attuned to dimensional disturbances across vast distances, making him an early warning system for transdimensional threats. But it also meant he'd never truly belong to just one universe again. He was caught between worlds, literally. The door chimed behind him. "Come in," Peter called without turning around. His spider sense had already identified the visitor. Captain Picard entered, carrying 2 cups of Earl Grey tea. He offered one to Peter, who accepted it gratefully. The drink had become something of a ritual between them over the past 2 weeks, quiet conversations in the observation lounge, Picard sharing stories of his decades in Starfleet while Peter recounted adventures from his years as Spider-Man. "I received word from Starfleet Command this morning," Picard said, settling into a chair near the viewport. "They've officially classified the dimensional incursion event and placed a priority on monitoring transdimensional activity throughout Federation space. Your contribution has been noted in their reports. Let me guess, they want me locked in a lab so their scientists can study the dimensional anchor phenomenon." "Actually, no." Picard's slight smile suggested he'd found this surprising as well. Admiral Nechayev herself reviewed the reports. Her conclusion was that you've proven too valuable in the field to be relegated to laboratory study. Instead, Starfleet has offered you a unique opportunity. Peter turned from the viewport, his interest piqued. "What kind of opportunity?" "A provisional commission in Starfleet, with the rank of lieutenant. You would serve aboard the Enterprise as a specialist in transdimensional phenomena and first contact situations involving beings from parallel universes." Picard set down his tea. "It's unprecedented, actually. Starfleet has never offered a commission to someone from another universe, but these are unprecedented circumstances." "Lieutenant Parker." Peter tested the words, finding them strange yet appealing. "What would that entail exactly?" "Standard duties when we're not facing dimensional threats. You'd work with our science teams, help train security personnel in unconventional combat tactics, and participate in away missions as needed. But your primary function would be as our expert on multiverse-related phenomena. Given your unique connection to what you call the web of life and destiny, you'd be our first line of defense against transdimensional incursions." Peter walked to the viewport, his reflection ghosting over the stars. Lieutenant Peter Parker, Starfleet officer. It had a ring to it. But accepting would mean acknowledging what he'd been avoiding for 2 weeks, he might never go home. Aunt May would never know what happened to him. MJ would move on, thinking him dead or disappeared. His entire life in his universe would fade into memory. "What about trying to find a way back to my universe?" Peter asked quietly. "Commander Data has been working with Starfleet's top physicists. Their consensus is that forcing a dimensional transition in your current state would have a 78% chance of killing you and a 92% chance of creating catastrophic dimensional instability." However, Picard paused, choosing his words carefully. "They believe that as you continue to adapt to your role as a dimensional anchor, you may naturally develop the ability to traverse dimensional barriers safely. It could take years, perhaps decades, but it's theoretically possible. So I'm not stuck forever. Just stuck for now." "Essentially, yes. And in the meantime, you could do remarkable good here. You've already saved countless lives, Peter. The Federation needs people like you, individuals with extraordinary abilities who are guided by conscience rather than ambition. Peter's spider sense whispered something interesting. Picard believed every word he was saying. The captain genuinely wanted Peter to join his crew, not as a weapon or a tool, but as a valued member of the Enterprise family. Can I have some time to think about it? Of course. We'll arrive at Starbase 84 in 3 days. You don't need to decide until then. Picard stood, preparing to return to his duties. But Peter, I hope you'll seriously consider it. You've already proven yourself to be an exceptional officer, even without the formal commission. After Picard left, Peter remained in the observation lounge, watching the stars and thinking about responsibility. Uncle Ben's words echoed in his mind, as they always did when he faced difficult choices. With great power comes great responsibility. But what was his responsibility now? His communicator, a Starfleet badge Data had fabricated for him, chirped. Mr. Parker, this is Commander Data. Your presence is requested in Holodeck 3. There is something I believe you will find interesting. Peter's spider sense registered curiosity but no danger. On my way. The holodeck was one of the Enterprise's most fascinating technologies, a room that could create realistic holographic environments for training, recreation, or research. Data had shown him how it worked, and Peter had spent a few sessions swinging through holographic recreations of New York City, trying to maintain his skills while adjusting to his new reality. When he entered Holodeck 3, he found himself standing on a city street. But not just any street, this was his New York. The version from his universe, recreated in perfect detail. The Daily Bugle building stood in the distance, familiar brownstones lined the street, and if he listened carefully, he could hear the authentic sounds of traffic and humanity that he'd missed more than he realized. Data stood nearby, along with Geordi LaForge, the Enterprise's chief engineer whose visor allowed him to see across multiple spectrums. We took the liberty of accessing your memories through the holodeck's interface, Geordi explained. Data mentioned that you seemed homesick, so we thought we'd create a place where you could practice. Practice? Peter asked, though his spider sense was already showing him what they meant. Your combat techniques rely heavily on three-dimensional urban environments, Data said. However, you have been unable to properly train since arriving in our universe. This holographic New York will allow you to maintain your skills. We can even generate opponents based on descriptions you provide. Peter felt that tightness in his chest again, the overwhelming gratitude that seemed to be a constant feature of his time on the Enterprise. These people didn't just accept him, they actively tried to make him feel at home. Thank you, Peter said, his voice thick. Both of you. This is more than I could have asked for. There's more, Geordi said with a grin. Computer, run Parker Program Alpha 1. The holographic city suddenly came alive. People appeared on the streets, going about their daily lives. And then, swinging between the buildings, Peter saw himself, or rather, a holographic recreation of Spider-Man in action, responding to a simulated crime in progress. We analyzed your movement patterns from the Borg encounter and your descriptions of your typical activities, Data explained. This program will allow you to experience scenarios similar to your previous crime-fighting activities. The computer will generate situations requiring your intervention, and you can practice your tactics in a safe environment. Peter watched his holographic counterpart web up a purse snatcher, and despite everything, despite being stranded in another universe, despite facing Borg and dimensional monsters, despite all the uncertainty, he laughed. Actually laughed, with genuine joy. You guys are the best, he said. Seriously. How can I ever repay you for this? By continuing to be yourself, Geordi said simply. The Enterprise has seen a lot of amazing beings, but there's something special about your attitude. You face impossible situations with humor and determination. That's rare, and it's something this crew values. Over the next few hours, Peter lost himself in the holographic New York, swinging between buildings and responding to simulated emergencies. It felt good to be Spider-Man again, to use his abilities for their intended purpose. And as he swung through the familiar streets, he realized something important. Being Spider-Man wasn't about being in one specific universe. It was about who he was, what he chose to do with his powers. Whether he was stopping muggers in Queens or fighting Borg cubes in the Alpha Quadrant, he was still the same person, someone who used his abilities to protect the innocent and stand against injustice. That night, Peter made his decision. The next morning, he found Captain Picard on the bridge, overseeing the ship's course corrections. Peter waited until there was a natural break in the captain's duties, then approached his command chair. "Captain, I've made my decision about Starfleet's offer." Picard turned, giving Peter his full attention. The bridge crew continued their duties, but Peter could sense their curiosity. "I accept the commission. I'll join Starfleet as a specialist in transdimensional phenomena." Peter took a breath. "But I want to make something clear, I haven't given up on getting home eventually. This isn't surrender. It's acceptance that my responsibility right now is here, in this universe, with this crew." Picard stood, extending his hand. "Lieutenant Parker, welcome to Starfleet. I'm pleased to have you officially join our crew." Peter shook the captain's hand, and applause broke out across the bridge. Worf nodded with approval, Data's expression suggested satisfaction, and even the typically reserved bridge officers showed genuine warmth. "Lieutenant Parker, report to Starbase 84 when we arrive for formal processing," Picard continued, slipping smoothly into captain mode. "You'll need to complete abbreviated academy training. Starfleet is waiving most requirements given your unique circumstances, but you'll still need to learn our protocols, regulations, and technology." "Understood, Captain." Peter couldn't help but grin. "Though I should warn you, I was never great at following all the rules back home. I suspected as much. Fortunately, the Enterprise has a long tradition of officers who believe rules are more like guidelines." Picard's eyes twinkled with amusement. "You'll fit right in." As Peter took his position at a secondary science station, Data had been teaching him to read the Enterprise's sensor displays. He felt his spider sense settle into a comfortable awareness of his surroundings. The Enterprise felt right now, not like a temporary refuge but like a home. A strange, futuristic home filled with aliens and impossible technology, but home nonetheless. His communicator chirped. "Parker, this is Crusher. Don't forget your medical checkup at 1,400 hours. And bring a web fluid sample. I want to run some tests on how replicator synthesis is affecting its molecular structure." "Will do, Doctor." Parker out. Troy approached his station, her empathic abilities clearly sensing his emotional state. "You're at peace with your decision?" "Yeah, I think I am. It's not what I planned, and part of me will always want to go home. But Uncle Ben taught me that with great power comes great responsibility. Right now, my responsibility is here." "Your uncle sounds like he was a wise man." "He was the best." Peter looked at the view screen, watching stars streak past at impossible speeds. "He'd probably think this is pretty cool, actually." His nephew, the Starfleet officer. Exploring strange new worlds, seeking out new life and new civilizations. Boldly going where no one has gone before, Troy finished with a smile. Exactly. The rest of the day passed in a blur of activity. Peter attended briefings, learned more about Starfleet protocols, and even had a session with Geordi where they discussed potentially integrating his web shooter technology into Starfleet equipment. By the time he returned to his quarters, real quarters now, not just guest accommodations, he was exhausted but satisfied. As he lay in bed, his spider sense painted a picture of the Enterprise around him. Thousands of people working, living, exploring together. A community bound by shared purpose and mutual respect. It was different from his life in New York, but in some ways, it was similar too. Different scale, same core principle, people taking care of each other. His last thought before sleep claimed him was of Aunt May. Wherever she was, whatever universe she occupied, he hoped she knew he was okay. That he'd found people who cared about him, who gave him purpose. That he was still being the hero she and Uncle Ben had raised him to be. And somewhere in the quantum foam between dimensions, a message echoed, carried not by technology but by the web of life and destiny itself. A simple message that traveled from one universe to another, from one heart to another. I'm okay. I'm home. I'm Spider-Man, *. In Queens, New York, in a universe far away, May Parker woke from a dream she wouldn't quite remember. But she felt, deep in her heart, that Peter was safe. That wherever he was doing good. And she smiled.